Welcome back for season 2 of the Nebraska Shootaround podcast, where we talk all things Nebraska basketball. I'm your host, Jacob Bigelow, the men's basketball beat writer for Varsity. And joining me again this season is my co-host, Jacob Bigelow, a former Nebraska ball manager and current contributor to Huskers Illustrated. Hey, say hello to the people, Bigelow.
Hello, it's great to be back. We, against all odds, we're here, season 2. The colors of the leaves are changing on the trees. It's getting a little colder, and that means it's almost time for basketball, man. I'm excited. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, and it kind of snuck up on us. We talked about hey, we should probably get this thing started up again, and we said that 2 or 3 times, and now we are rapidly approaching the first exhibition game. So now is definitely the time to get started. But before we get into today's show, we have a sponsor. And this is pretty cool for me because I used to watch this show as a kid. Nebraska Public Media's Big Red Wrap-Up breaks down each Nebraska game with highlights, expert analysis, behind-the-scenes stories, and recruiting news from Husker football insiders. Every Tuesday night, join host Michael Severe for Big Red Wrap-Up live at 7 on the network's World TV channel and Facebook, and again at 10 on Nebraska Public Media. Or catch Big Red Wrap-Up live at nebraskapublicmedia.org/Big Red and on the Nebraska Public Media app. Now, let's get into the show. We are quickly approaching the start of year 4 for Fred Hoiberg at Nebraska, like I just said. The exhibition game against Hurrdat State coming up. I just got back from Big Ten Media Days up in Minneapolis, made a trip up there with Drake Keeler, our new women's basketball beat writer at Varsity. And we got to hear from Hoiberg, Sam Griesel, Derek Walker, as well as Amy Williams, Alexis Markowski, and Jazz Shelley. And we'll definitely have Drake on to talk about the women's side of things at some point here. But today, we're going to stick with our side, our beat, and focus mostly on kind of what we heard at Media Day, what we've heard throughout the offseason, and kind of react to that before we dive kind of into more specific preview stuff moving forward. So I thought we'd start off this episode with a little game where I'm going to play for you some clips from Media Day that kind of stood out to me or that I thought were interesting, and I want you to react and kind of offer your thoughts. Sound good?
Sounds good, man. I'm all about it.
All right, here we go. First one is Fred Hoiberg talking about his team and kind of how this year's team can kind of have success where last year's failed.
I think I look at it starts with the leadership. It starts with with Sam Griesel and Emmanuel, Jawan, Derek, Wilhelm, Denham. We just have a group that's got some innate toughness to them. And, a lot of times you either have it or you don't. I think this group has, the grit to help us compete. We didn't have a chance to win many ugly games when the ball wasn't going in the hoop a year ago. The one game was probably Rutgers, where I think we shot 29%, still had a chance to win. But this group, I think, if the ball isn't going in, they're still going to have a chance to win because of the identity that they're trying to build on the defensive end of the floor. Size, I think we have size, and again, that toughness, you have to have. If you're going to compete in this league consistently, you have to have the mental toughness to be able to do that.
Yo.
I feel like, I think one of the main talking points we've heard under Fred is how his teams react to adversity, and if the opponent lands the first punch, how do they respond? Last year's team, funny he mentions Rutgers because that is one of the games that vividly, I remember way too much about that game last year, but they just it was more style over substance, flash over, that's kind of what last year's team feels like. And he's making it pretty clear that they've kind of flipped the switch, just with the type of guys they've recruited and the kind of experience that those guys have. I guess what stuck out to me was him listing all the transfers they brought in and then listing Denham Dawson. That was an immediate eyebrow raise. He was an early enroller last year, got here at the semester, and to be mentioned, in terms of leadership, along with, old wily vets like Griesel and Walker and Emmanuel Vandemel, that sticks out to me, definitely.
Yeah, and that is why we do this pod together, because we think a lot alike, and that's definitely something that stuck out to me there too. And actually, I asked him about kind of the rotation because he had said previously that he was going to have some tough calls kind of at the back end of the rotation and filling out those last couple of spots. And he just was talking generally about like some young guys, whatever, and then just kind of unprompted said like that Dawson is a guy that he hasn't talked about enough, and that is a guy that you know what you're going to get from him every single day. He's just consistent effort, laying it all out there on the court, defense, hustling after loose balls, all those types of things. So yeah, it sounded like he listed all the guys that you'd expect, kind of the key players coming back, the key additions, and then Denham Dawson. So he was one of those guys that's kind of on the fringe of the rotation, like wasn't quite sure what to expect from him. But it sounds like he's got a really good shot to actually be part of the rotation this season. So yeah, that stuck out to me as well. I didn't include the Denham clip, but we can loop that in here quite nicely. And so, like reacting to your point about kind of the substance over flash, here's Derek Walker talking about what went wrong last year.
I think for last year's team, I think we kind of just walked out every game thinking that we were going to win. I think we just let our hype get to us more than anything because we were a talented group and we had some really good players. So I just thought everyone was just going to go out and just rely on those talents and we were just going to win without having to actually like work the game for the full 40. So just having all that talent on the team and so many egos and stuff like that, we just didn't get the outcomes that we wanted.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty brutally honest. It definitely wouldn't be hard to infer that was how the team played, between body language and shot selection and lack of, composure. I mean, all sorts of things that, we saw up close and personal toward the end of last year. And I've heard Fred say, verbatim that in his opinion, what went wrong last year was like the difference in personalities. And he said that it just took too long for them to come together as a unit or as a team. And it was just a bunch of personalities that it took too long to mesh. And now, and hearing that from Derek, who's been, he's been here with Fred since Fred first got here, and it's a pretty blunt, honest assessment, but I would say he's probably right.
Yeah, and like he said, like credit to him for saying it. It's not often. I don't think you'd expect to hear that blunt of an assessment, especially for a guy that was part of that. Like he was a leader on that team, and this will kind of lead me into this next point. And Derek, I think you're around Derek is a very good leadership presence, and he's a guy great character guy, all those types of things. But he even said himself like this week that he's still kind of learning about like the vocal side of things and how to speak up when, and it's something he actually admires about Sam Griesel, who has a knack for like speaking up and saying the right things at the right times, whether it's grabbing guys during a timeout in a game, like getting them ready for clutch situations or whatever else it might be. Like that's where Sam Griesel comes on. So this next clip is Griesel talking about kind of opening night and what that meant to him and just kind of this opportunity to play in Nebraska.
Yeah, honestly, that night I got a little emotional throughout it. It was just kind of a full circle moment, I guess, for me. But, I mean, I think from the outside looking in, it could look like a lot of pressure and stuff like that, but I don't see it as that. I think pressure is kind of whatever you make it. And, the focus for this team is just taking it day by day and not making the moment bigger than it actually is. And I think for me specifically, that's really important because, yeah, it's really cool that I get to live out my dream and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I want this team to be successful. And I want to do whatever I can or whatever is in my power for us to be successful.
Yeah, I mean, that's about as Sam Griesel of an answer as there could possibly be. I mean, I I had never really interacted with Sam until I talked to him back in the spring, and now just everything I hear him say, I'm like, nope, that's Sam. That's Sam being Sam. Just genuine, you know. And it's cool to hear that. You know, he's gonna be. I mean, I think, you know, we're 9 days before the exhibition game. I think he's gonna be the de facto, you know, face of the program this season. I'd be surprised if there's not a, you know, post game where he's not one of the first guys talking to us. And it's just, you know, that's what you want to hear from the guy who's brought in to, one, be the straw that stirs the drink on offense. You know, he's going to be the point guard. He's going to be initiating offense. He's going to be I think Fred called him the head of the snake. And that's also what you want to hear from a guy that it's been widely admitted that they like him as a player. They like him almost even more as a culture guy and a leader and, you know, an off the court presence. And, you know, he can help this team in multiple ways, both on and off the court.
Yeah, and Fred said, like, during his time in front of the TV cameras up front, that how, like, Sam's rubbing off on the other players. Like, everything that he's done throughout this offseason, the other guys have kind of followed in his footsteps. They've kind of adopted his same type of work ethic, his same approach to putting in the work. And again, the step-by-step, the day-by-day process, hey, we're going to get better here. And like Sam said, success for him isn't necessarily like he wants to win games, obviously, and he really wants to win games and wants to help this program win games. But he's focused on the only way they can do that is by the day-to-day process. And so as long as they're getting better day to day, he'll consider that a success, and then expects the results to follow. And that kind of, like we talked about last year, the mesh of personalities, it didn't quite, produce lesser than the sum of the parts. And that, I think you can see intentionally this offseason, Fred really went after guys that come from winning programs and winning programs at different levels. And where you got, obviously, Griso coming from the Summit League. We'll see how that translates to the Big Ten, but they won a lot of games there, and that's a good program up there. And Emmanuel Bandamel coming from SMU, quality program over there. And Juwan Gary coming from Alabama, NCAA tournament team. And so all those mesh, plus kind of Derek Walker falling back on his experience at Tennessee. And now he's got other guys that have been in winning programs as well that can kind of mesh with, I guess, that the kind of personality or what it takes to win and know and understand, as opposed to just like thinking like they can go out and just be successful because of who they are. And so this next one is Griso talking about Bandamel and Gary, the two other transfers, and what they're going to bring to the program.
Both of them, obviously, like you said, have had success in the past. And, you know, it takes a specific mentality and work ethic to win. You know, winning is really hard, especially, obviously, in the Big Ten and where they've come from. And I think, to me, it's all about doing the little things. And I think those two do the little things, and the leadership group that we have this year, we all do the little things and lead by example first. But yeah, those two specifically, Emmanuel is a really high energy guy. You know, he's a really good defender and brings a lot of energy on that side of the floor. And I've been really impressed with his shot making ability as well. And then Juwan just kind of brings a dog mentality to our group, and something that we all feed off of. You know, we've had a few scrimmages now, and he really gets under people's skin. And, you know, offensive rebounding is huge, and that really kind of demoralizes an opponent in a lot of situations. So, you know, he's just going to be that dog for us that every team that wants to be successful needs.
Yeah, when we kind of got a similar story when Bandamel and Gary both committed, was these guys embraced their roles at their previous stops. They were fan favorites. They were energy guys. They were, you know, they were cut from the same cloth. And, you know, to hear, you know, that's about, you know, I'm still wondering what to think of Bandamel as like a primary, you know, starter, you know, maybe a go-to player. I don't know what to think yet. I think something that's kind of, you know, been kind of forgotten about Gary is he comes, you know, he played at Alabama for Nate Oates, and I think Nate Oates's, you know, at least offensive scheme, that's what Fred wants to see from his guys. Their schemes are very similar So Gary's embraced a role in a system similar to Fred's, which is almost an added bonus. And that's all we've heard about him is he's a dog. He's fighting inside, that sort of thing. But these guys all, like you said, they come from established programs that have been there, done that, gotten to the postseason, and have seen success. And when you've seen success and you've been a part of it, all you want is more. That I've heard it compared to a drug. Winning's a drug. You just want to keep winning. You just want to keep repeating. Everything that comes along with success, you want to do whatever it takes to feel it again. And it's clear that these guys know their role, they know their strength, and it's a completely different vibe. Talking like teammates waxing poetic about one another and how they're embracing their roles and everything. It's completely different than what we've heard these past couple of years.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you summed that up well. And again, it's just continuation of the offseason theme, everything we've heard. Next two clips are about guys that were actually in the program last year and coming back, and they will play key roles. So first, here's Fred Hoiberg on C.J. Wilcher.
Yeah, CJ, it started with his body and his commitment to taking care of himself, and he dropped 15 pounds. So, that's where it started for CJ. He addressed it. He knew he had to get better with it, and he did it. He accomplished it. And, you look at his year last year, he had a good year. He shot 41% from three, averaged, I think, almost 9 points. And especially the way he finished, he was a 50% three-point shooter over the last couple months of our season. So, yeah, his biggest thing was working on his body and being able to play more sustained minutes and playing longer stretches because of what he did, from a physicality standpoint. So CJ's been awesome. He's worked on a lot of things, and, his body probably being the biggest thing.
Yeah, I feel like whenever our biggest thing with Wilcher on this podcast especially was his foot speed and him on the defensive end. And him dropping that weight and working on his body, you're going to probably be able to see quickly on both ends of the court, the payoff or the progress right away. And he turned it on toward the end of the year last year. We were a little skeptical, but then he turned it on toward the end of the year shooting the ball. So that was many, many months ago, and he's clearly put effort into changing his body. But if he's got that same mentality when he's out there, he could be a big part of this team offensively, when offense is probably the biggest question mark we have.
Yeah, and he played well last year, and he was efficient in the ways that they used him. My question is kind of, all right, what does a step forward look like? What is his role going to be this year? Is he going to be just a spot up, the occasional movement shooter? Can they find different ways to get him the ball more? Because again, average around eight and change points a game last year. Solid for COVID freshman, sophomore, second year player in college basketball. So it's something you can really build off of. But what does that actually look like in practice? How can they get more out of him? And Hoiberg talking about like just the ability to play longer with the improved physical fitness, the stamina, that being in itself, like he's going to be able to play more. Like he can play in more than 20, 25 minutes. You can go out there and he can theoretically play starters minutes now. And then with that, you probably see some more shots coming his way. But so is it simply that? Is he going to be the same guy just playing more minutes, or has he taken a step forward in his ability to impact the game in other ways? Can he put the ball on the deck a little bit more? Can he get to the basket a little bit more? Can he pass the ball a little bit more? I think he's still going to be primarily the off-ball weapon, their best shooter. They're going to use him in all their sets to get three-point looks and all that. But I'll be curious to see kind of to what degree does his game expand this year, or does it look like more of the same? And even that, if it's more of the same, that's still a valuable player, especially playing off a guy like Sam Griesel. I think Sam's going to get CJ a lot of open looks this year. So yeah, CJ is going to be a key part of this team, and we'll see kind of what can he give them in his second year in the program. And then another guy that, like, what is he going to give this team? Wilhelm Reinbach, coming off the injury. We only got to see 10 games of him. He didn't play particularly well in those 10 games, but again, he's a true freshman who also had to deal with some knee problems at the end of his senior season, cut short because of knee issue, and wasn't full go until like during the summer or whatever. So hopefully we'll be able to see what they thought they were getting in Wilhelm this season. And Derek Walker is certainly excited about what he's seen so far, and this is him talking about his likely front court starting partner.
I love Wilhelm. I love playing with Wilhelm, and I tell him that all the time. Even last year when he went down, I told him I was mad at him for it, even though it wasn't his fault. But I love Will. He's a hard-working player. He's going to rebound. He's going to make shots. He just plays the game the right way. He does foul, but I love it. I mean, he's being aggressive. So I love playing with Will, especially with his size. He's so smart. His ability to just be a team player. He's going hard, and his heart is in the right place.
Yeah, I mean, and this is just a little thing, but I thought it was kind of surprising that Wilhelm was the first guy we heard from, and with the media this year. Obviously coming off the long layoff from the knee injury and everything, but I mean, he, if you're a casual observer, you've only watched him play a little bit, you're like, funny looking guy, funny looking shot. What are we doing here? But to hear Walker, who him and his workmanlike, his game. I mean, it's workmanlike. His attitude, his game, it's workmanlike. And for him to say, he loves Wilhelm and he loves what he's bringing. I mean, if they can have five guys who play as hard and work like Derek, they may be in business, and and they could that's what you want to hear. And I completely agree with you. I think Wilhelm is probably starting in the front court with Derek, which could create a lot of things, both positive and negative. But we'll get to that. but still promising to hear that coming from Derek, obviously.
Yeah, I think that is like the one question. Like you feel pretty good. I think Sam Griesel, Bandamel, Wilcher, and Walker, those guys are starting. I think it's pretty clear this year. And that 4 spot was the kind of the wild card with Juwan Gary coming in as a transfer. I started some games at Alabama, but kind of unique player, undersized 4-man who can't shoot at all, but does some good things. Versus Wilhelm, who is probably more of 5 than a 4. I don't love his mobility defensively, but out of their 4, 5 front court players, he's still got to prove it, but he has the best chance at being able to space the floor and knock down shots from the perimeter compared to Derek, Blaze Keita, Oleg Koyanets, and Gary himself. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how they piece together those lineups and that front court in particular, and how much Wilhelm versus Gary plays and how that comes together. But I just thought it was interesting just the way that Derek raved about Wilhelm. And Fred was really excited about him when they landed him as a recruit. He was one of the guys they really prioritized in that class coming out of modern day. And we really haven't gotten to see much of anything because that freshman year is basically just a wash. So. Okay, this last clip has nothing to do with Nebraska, but story time with Fred is always fun, and especially when it's Kevin Garnett story time. So here we go.
KG was the best. I mean, I use him as an example a lot with our team of the type of person he was. His motor was never off, and that was the thing that was most impressive about him. He'd play back-to-back 45-minute games, and he'd be the first guy in the gym the next day, setting the tone for the team and for practice, just to show you his competitiveness. So I think it was 2 days after I'd gotten home from my open heart procedure at the Mayo Clinic, Kevin Garnett comes to my house unannounced. And, I was down and out. I had a really tough recovery. And he came in and played video games with my son, Jack. Jack was 5 at the time, and they played I think it was Nintendo. They played baseball, and KG beat him. I think it was 25-1. And that's just who he was. I mean, he didn't care who you were. It's just his overall competitiveness is what made him special. And, again, I use that for our guys all the time as far as what they can do, why the great ones are great. You know, it's because of their approach every single day, and that's who Kevin Garnett was. That's who he still is.
I mean, that's I mean, that does not surprise me one little bit. I'm just picturing KG in Fred's living room circa 2005, like talking trash to 5-year-old Jack Hoiberg playing Nintendo baseball, and that alone is some great imagery just to think about. But I mean, the message is still, I mean, it's you know, competitors never stop competing, and that's, you know, and KG, you know, love him or hate him, he's one of the biggest competitors we've seen, you know, in basketball this century, whether it was the talking trash or just being, you know, I hate how much this phrase has entered the basketball lexicon, but just being a dog. I mean, just being a dog. And, you know, Kevin Garnett, that doesn't surprise me that he kept that same energy off the court, even if it was with 5-year-old Jack Hoiberg. So
I'm sure he was mad at himself that he gave up even one run against the 5-year-olds. But yeah, so that's kind of putting a bow on the media days there. There's a lot of good stuff. We'll have more coming out of it at hailvarsity.com. Drake and I both have stories up there. You can go to our YouTube channel to listen in full to the media sessions from the players, from the coaches. So go there for anything we didn't get to here, but I think there wasn't anything new necessary that we heard there outside of kind of some of the things we've hit on already. It's just a continuation of this offseason theme. Like, all right, we've got winners on this team now. Let's hope that we can actually win. Because coming off last year, as a reminder, they went 10-22, which is actually a step forward over the previous 2 years. They tied for last in the Big Ten with a 4-16 record. And they were 140th overall in KenPom, 117th in offense, and 178th on defense. And the result of that was quite a bit of shakeup. They made 2 assistant coaching changes. Nate Lenzer is the only assistant back from last year. They added Adam Howard to work on, who is known for his defensive principles and some of the matchup zones, some of the pressing, some of that type of stuff. So I'll be curious to see kind of how much of that influence seeps into the team this year. And then Ernie Ziegler from Ben Howland's staff down Mississippi State, UCLA, and before then. So those are the new guys on the staff. And we talked about 4 players back with Walker, with Wilcher, with Reinbach, and Keisei Tominaga. They 4 transfers from the other D1 schools or junior college, with the 3 that we've already discussed, with Bandamel, with Griesel, and with Gary, as well as Blaze Kita at the center spot. And then they got a bunch of true and redshirt freshmen. So it's kind of, I guess, right up top there, what are your takeaways on kind of how the staff came together, what this roster looks like, and kind of how that goes in line with the message that Hoiberg is trying to get out this offseason?
Well, first off, staff-wise, I mean, it obviously sticks out that, you know, it's definitely a more traditional college basketball, you know, staff structure. Fred made sure to say, you know, in his first media availability, you know, he's got 2 guys that are always on the road recruiting, and that is one more than who was how many assistants were usually out recruiting the first 3 years. So that's, you know, that's a welcome sign of improvement. You know, he hired, I think the last podcast we did that wasn't with Roby was right after they hired Adam Howard. And we talked about all the different zone schemes and stuff that he ran at South Alabama. And, you know, defense has been an emphasis. That was, you know, they didn't talk about it as much at media day. It was more so just competing and wanting to be competitive. But when they got up, when Emmanuel, Wilhelm, and Fred talked to us for the first time, it was all about, you know, defense. It was like, we're, you know, starting with defense, you know, taking charges, this, and this. You see pictures of Fred on Twitter wearing shirts with, you know, the charge leaderboard on it. Probably not, you know, if we go back to 2018 and say what, you know, Fred Hoiberg talking about charges and playing defense. What has gone wrong here? What has gone wrong? Look at the last 3 years. That is what's gone wrong here. So there's been, it's more so, I was with Tim Miles for 3 years at Nebraska, and it sounds more and more like what was emphasized, a more traditional Big Ten approach, traditional approach to a staff, traditional approach to recruiting, and an emphasis on defense, and it all starting with defense because as we know, the Big Ten is the Big Ten, and it's not just on the football field where you see final scores of 9-6. Shout out Iowa, but it's on the basketball court too. It's a physical league. It's a long, you see guys like Hunter Dickinson and Zach Edey and these big guys. They're not a dime a dozen in the Big Ten. Multiple teams have 7-footers and a ton of length from 1 through 5. And, that's what, it took till year 4, but that's kind of the approach they're trying to do, is more of a traditional, to put a spin on a quote from a certain former football coach. The Big Ten hasn't adjusted to them. They are adjusting to the Big Ten. And it took 3 years, but here we are.
Yeah. And it's interesting. Hoiberg emphasized size. They've got great positional size at a lot of spots. It's still, looking at this roster, I still don't think it's in terms of individual defensive talent, I don't know that it's quite where it needs to be in terms of how kind of you match up. Because you look at it, you got 6'7" point guard in Sam Griesel, a 6'4" guard in Emmanuel Bandamel, the 6'5" wing in CJ Wilcher, 6'10" power forward in Wilhelm Reinbach, and then a 6'9" center in Derek Walker. So it's kind of interesting. You've got size at the point, kind of average size at the 2, maybe a little undersized on the wing. You're plus at the 4, and then you're a little undersized at the 5. Then you go to the backups. You've got a traditional center size in Blaze Keita, 6'11", 241, I believe is less that. Undersized is 6'4" in Juwan Gary. Denham Dawson, about typical wing size, about 6'6" there. Then you've got either Keisei Tominaga or Jamarcus Lawrence at the 2 guard, and then potentially Ramel Lloyd at 6'6" as a point guard kind of ball handler. Fred talked about Emmanuel Bandamel might be the secondary ball handler when Griesel is sitting. We'll see kind of how that plays out, but Lloyd, Cale Jacobson as a walk-on there is in the mix as well as kind of a backup point guard type. So it's just interesting to see kind of just the rosters up and down in terms of, all right, we're plus in size here, we're undersized here. Which of these guys are kind of have the quickness, the length, the strength to match up? I don't know. I think Bandamel is basically the Trey McGowan's replacement, kind of the off guard that can handle the ball a little bit when you need him to. He'll defend the other team's best guard.
And then on offense, he's the no yes guy.
Yeah.
That's what you're telling me. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah. Bandamel, I don't think I think he's a little bit better of a perimeter shooter than Trey was. Trey developed into a guy that could hit shots, but it was really low volume. Bandamel is not a guy that is shy about letting it fly. And you can go check out HailVarsity.com. We'll probably touch on these more as we get into more position previews or however we want to do it. But I did a film study on Bandamel from his SMU time last season, and yeah, that guy will fire it up anytime you get a look. So I'm sure Hoiberg likes that to a certain degree. But so yeah, Bandamel will take the other team's best guard, and then you'll kind of just figure it out with Griesel and Wilcher on the other perimeter players. I don't know that either one of those guys, like Sam, I think is a good team defender, and that size and length is great to have, but how does he match up with quick, smaller guards? That might be a little tough. Same thing with CJ. We talked about he's in better shape, but to what degree does that help? Or is he just not, like, I don't think he's a guy that's naturally blessed with like plus lateral quickness. He'll be better, but still don't know that it'll be a strength. So it'll be interesting to see. I think how much of those zones How much of the pressing do they kind of incorporate to take advantage of the length, where maybe not all these guys are going to be able to stay in front and lock down their man one-on-one, but as a collective unit, maybe we can use that length. You can steer guys into help. You can have the shot blocker, the charge taker there waiting. You can be in the gaps. How much are they in gaps versus being aggressive out on the wings and trying to force turnovers? How much are they trapping? Like, there's just a lot of different ways you can play here. And I'm curious to see what they decide on. Again, leaning on Howard's background and all the things that he's done, kind of what Hoiberg wants to do, just from we already know that they're going to be more aggressive on the offensive glass. He's not necessarily going to be as focused on sending everybody back, back on defense. You'll see guys like Juwan Gary and Keita and guys like that crash in the offensive glass, which wasn't really a focus before. So there's a lot of different ways that this team could end up playing. There's some questions there, but there's also some strengths that the coaches, I think, can take advantage. And I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out.
Yeah, I think one thing, neither of us were at the opening night event, but I think one thing that was a takeaway was this team played fast for 3 years. Just because they're talking defense doesn't mean they're not going to stop trying to play fast. And that is definitely, how does this defense first mentality translate to Fred Hoiberg tempo offense? That is definitely a big TBD. I think I heard Fred say that, the offensive, identity they're going to try to go for is like his early Bulls teams. I think I've heard him say that. So go find some old Chicago Bulls tape if you want a preview of what you may see. I don't think I love Sam Griesel. I don't think he's going to run the point like Rajon Rondo, but we'll see. Yeah. It's definitely, there's still definitely plenty of questions for sure. But what has been made obvious is, I think Fred understands the situation. He kind of knows it was time to adjust in multiple ways. He had to cut ties with, two guys who he'd worked with at Nebraska and his previous stop at Iowa State. And he, 3 years in at Nebraska, he's like, all right, well, the old way, maybe we got to try something different. And that's refreshing and also kind of terrifying at the same time.
Yeah. And the other thing, like, talk about winning and understanding what it takes to win. And Hoiberg also talked a lot about kind of the close games and being able to execute in late games, and how that kind of snowballed on them last season, where they lost a couple of those early on and then simply got into the case where, oh, here we go again. And I mean, we talked about it all last season, like how many different ways they found to mess up late game situations, and how different would the season have gone if they got a couple of those. And ultimately, I think everything we've heard, it's even if they win one or two of those, like, it still wouldn't have completely changed the team, but it would have helped. And you feel a little bit different, I think, about games if they had gotten a few of those and shown that they could do it, tack on a few more wins there. All right, now based on, you go from 7 to 14 wins, you've doubled your win total there, and now you're like, all right, we kind of figured something out here, and we're moving in the right direction. Because I think that's what you have to see. Like, I don't know what the win total is, but you have to show that you're moving in the right direction this season. And that's what this year is about. And we saw, you look at the 2021 team, they were actually 40th in KenPom on defense, but they were so bad on offense, 179th, that it didn't matter. So they're trying to find that balance of it. Obviously, they're emphasizing defense because they tailed off, like I said, 178th on defense this year, and we're outside the top 100 on offense. So they're trying to find a little bit more of that balance to where they can hang in games, and then get down the stretch, you make a play here or there, and you got to win. And so that's kind of what they're shooting for. And we'll see. I think they have the potential to again, hold up better defensively. I think they've got pieces that fit what Fred Hoiberg wants to do a little bit better. Like watching Sam Griesel's tape, like I think he is the kind of point guard that Fred wanted to have, as opposed to a guy like Alonzo Verge Jr. last year, who really good playmaker, but the ball stuck in his hands so much. The thing that stuck out to me, like watching Sam's tape for the film study I did on him, almost every single time down the floor, he gave the ball up right away. He didn't immediately try to go into action. He gave the ball up, he cut, he got somewhere else, he got it back, and then looked to attack there. It's giving other guys a chance to touch the ball, to make a play. It's given a chance to kind of shift the defense a little bit, and then, all right, I'm getting it back, and I'm going to make a play. And that's something that we just didn't see a ton of last year. It was just so much of the ball sticking in Burge's hands and McGowan's hands and all that type of thing. And then the offenses kind of fell apart. They were too easy to game plan for and to take away the strengths. So we'll see. Sam did not play a single high major team last season. So it's hard to know like how he made a big leap from his sophomore to junior, and then an even bigger leap from his junior to senior year. And the question is, how does that translate to the Big Ten, where the guys he's taken advantage of, he took advantage of a lot of smaller defenders. He's plays a lot of bully ball. He kind of gets to his spot. He's real patient. How does that work against guys he's going to see in the Big Ten? I don't know. We really don't have a frame of reference for it, so it's going to be unknown. But the way he approaches the game, I think, will serve him well and serve this team well. And then the question is, like, who else besides, like, who can go get a bucket? Who can create an advantage in the Big Ten? And that's what we don't know. I think Bandamel is more of an off-ball guy than a guy that I want trying to create for himself. Same thing for CJ. And we don't know what Wilhelm is. I think Derek Walker took a massive step forward. I never saw him being the type of player that he became. And he said neither did he. Like, he grew up in the shadows of Michael Porter Jr. and Trey Young down there in that MoCan program in high school and Sunrise and all that. Played a lot of good players. He never had a chance to kind of be the guy for a team. And then at Tennessee, he's playing behind Grant Williams, who's in the NBA now. And so, like, he's never had the chance to kind of see like what he could do as the lead guy. And he found out, like, actually I can do this. And so that was one of the coolest stories from last season that we saw. I'm looking forward to seeing how that progresses this year. But ultimately, that I think that will determine how the season goes. Is, all right, what can they do on offense? How can they consistently generate and take advantage of good opportunities on the offensive end in the Big Ten?
Absolutely. I would definitely agree that is question one for the entire year. And, this skit, and, we can wrap up with this because, we're going to, talk about more season preview stuff the next time you hear from us. And, there's 2 exhibitions way sooner than later, but the regular season schedule, it gets real fast. I know the home non-con slate isn't that impressive, but I mean, the 3rd game of the year, they're getting on a plane to go to Queens to play St. John's. And, completely different teams for both teams, but the last time a Nebraska team went to Queens to play St. John's, they got clowned. And that St. John's team wasn't really good, and that Nebraska team wound up winning 20-plus games. But that is a small gym against a physical team that's going to play hard, and that's game 3. They go to Florida, start with Oklahoma. Porter Moser, he's a really, really good coach. He's shown that his team will be no slouch, and there's a chance they end up playing 3 power conference teams just in Florida, and then they come back, and in a span of 6 days to start December, they get to make the drive up I-80 to play preseason top 10 Creighton at Creighton, and then go to Assembly Hall to play preseason Big Ten favorite Indiana, and then Purdue comes to town. I mean, it's going to get real fast, and they're not going to have anywhere to hide.
Well said. And we will not be hiding this season. You'll hear from us. Hopefully every week is the plan. Once again, we'll try to make it work with our schedule. We'll come at you again with another episode, hopefully before the exhibition game, to kind of go down through the roster a little bit more in depth and point out some of the stuff that I kind of stumbled upon in my film studies in the summer and see how these players fit into what Nebraska wants to do this year. But for now, pretty excited to just have basketball back in our lives. And this is the Nebraska Shootaround podcast. We'll be there all season long, bringing you recaps and analysis of year 4 of Fred Hoiberg, along with some coverage of Amy Williams and her squad, who should have another great season. That'll be fun to watch. So stay tuned with us.